The supporting acting categories might be my favorite acting races at the Oscars each year. It's where the wild stuff usually happens. Villains get rewarded, character actors finally get their flowers, and in some cases, careers get resurrected overnight. In the supporting actor category, this century alone, we've seen Heath Ledger win it posthumously, Mahershala Ali grab 2 in the span of 3 years, and Ke Huy Quan, of course, complete one of the best comeback stories that Hollywood has ever seen. But on today's video, I'm not going to be talking about those guys, but rather I am going to be ranking my top 10 supporting actor nominations of this century that did not win the gold. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the garage. Gerald here with you. I'm excited to be diving in to another edition in what I'm calling my Century series. I will tag the playlist on this video down below for you. I've done this same video for supporting actress and for both of the lead acting categories over the span of the last year or so. On today's video, however, I'm going to be doing the 10 nominations that I liked the most that we've received from the year 2000 up until our most recent Oscars, which was for the film year 2025. Now, the only rule is that you could not be the winner. So if you were an Oscar winner this century for the supporting actor category, you would not be on this list. Real quick before we get there, please subscribe if you haven't already. If you like countdowns, rankings, really for all things film, but a lot of times centered around the Oscars or award season. And also if you're super interested and you find yourself coming here regularly, I love to add new members and I have a growing community over there. So if you're interested, just click join down below. You can read all about it and join for as little as a couple bucks a month. Let's get into today's ranking. All right, kicking us off at my number 10 here is Eddie Murphy from Dreamgirls. In full disclosure, by the way, his Party All the Time track from 1983 or whatever it was is an absolute bona fide banger. It's literally in a heavy rotation on my Spotify, and that's in 2026. So take that for what you will. But watching him ham it up here as James Thunder Early was pure joy for me. He's one of our best old school performers, I think. You know, he's a full-blown entertainer who was likely one of those people that's just born with it. Now, he famously walked out of the 2007 Oscar ceremony after losing this category to Alan Arkin, of course, for Little Miss Sunshine. And the long-running theory out there has been that Norbit may have been the movie that sank him. It was that poorly received slapstick comedy that Murphy was in, and it just came out a few weeks before the ceremony, and voters may have held it against him. Look, I don't know. I mean, I love Arkin in that movie, but this should have been Eddie's, if you ask me. Not just for Dreamgirls, but for a legendary career. 2003 at number 9 is Benicio del Toro in a film called 21 Grams. This movie is a straight up gut punch, a gut wrencher. It is a brutal look at loss, grief, human resolve. Benicio plays kind of our antagonist, but really only in label, because Iñárritu, the filmmaker, brilliantly gives us the POV of so many different players in this story. You know, we actually sympathize with the pain that del Toro's character has to carry because of the mistakes that he's made. And this movie is stacked. Sean Penn, Naomi Watts, Melissa Leo, they are all doing some all-time work in their careers in this movie. But, you know, del Toro plays that everyman, the one that's grounded. You know, he makes us realize how easy it is to villainize somebody when really they're just the victim of unfortunate circumstances. In that regard, this movie was ahead of its time, really. His performance is oddly sympathetic, and I think it shows you exactly what kind of actor he was and is going to end up being in the future, as this was almost 25 years ago. That year, he lost, by the way, to Tim Robbins for Mystic River, and I get it. I guess I get it. Doesn't mean I have to like it, right? Number 8 might be a bit of a surprise, but for me, it's Paul Raci in The Sound of Metal. He plays Joe, who is a mentor, runs kind of like this counseling center, and he becomes a bit of a father figure to Riz Ahmed's Ruben. What has kind of stuck with me from his performance is his calm, tender approach to kind of coaching Ruben through his ongoing struggle with addiction because he's there in recovery. And remember, you know, Ruben's character is a drummer, and he lives for music, hard rock music, by the way. He's lost almost all of his hearing, so there's this added weight making it even harder for him to stay clean, right? And that's exactly why Raci's calm presence matters so much. You know, I think we all meet people in this world that move us on to our next chapter, and sometimes neither one of you even realize that's what's happening. Well, that's Joe, and he's that person for Ruben in this movie. And Racy plays this with zero vanity. He ended up losing to Daniel Kaluuya that year for Judas and the Black Messiah. But for a working character actor to finally get his moment like this as an Oscar nominee was truly special. Number 7, Jonah Hill in Moneyball. Big surprise from the baseball guy, right? My regulars know. But in 2011, remember kind of like where our mind as a society was when it comes to Jonah Hill, right? We were watching him hurl dick jokes in movies like Superbad or the 21 Jump Street films. He was always kind of that loudmouth with an erratic style of humor. So when he peeled back the onion and gave us his version of Peter Brand, which is this quiet, nerdy math whiz, it was even more surprising and impressive. You know, his analytical approach to the character balances wonderfully against Brad Pitt's Billy Bean, who's this like off-the-cuff, carefree dude, basically Brad Pitt playing himself. And the two of them together in this movie, though, are legit one of my favorite screen pairings in recent memory. And in full disclosure, as I said, I am a huge baseball fan. So this is obviously one of my favorite films that the Academy has shown love to this century, and the nomination for Hill made it even sweeter for me. He ended up losing to Christopher Plummer for Beginners that year, which was a bit of a career capper win, and I can't argue with it. Number 6, maybe arguably the most popular nominee in my 10 here is Ryan Gosling in Barbie, of course. You know, he's an actor who's due his gold any day now. In fact, it could come this year as he's possibly going to get nominated for Project Hail Mary. But let's talk Ken for a second. On paper, you know, a Ken doll coming to life is an absurd idea that should be fodder for like a cheesy TV movie. But Gosling adds a layer to this guy. Underneath all that absurdity, there's a genuine like quest for purpose and belonging. And his performance came with a real emotionality that I was not expecting. On top of that, he's funny and charming as hell. Although, honestly, that describes most of Gosling's resume anyway. By the way, that I'm Just Ken Oscar performance is already in the history books as an all-time ceremony moment as well. He lost to Robert Downey Jr., of course, for Oppenheimer a couple years ago for this. And of course, that was Nolan's juggernaut that year. So Ken never really stood a chance. But for my money, this is still one of the most like rewatchable nominated performances of this century. All right, halfway point here. At number 5, we've got Jeremy Strong from The Apprentice. If you knew his work on the TV show Succession, then you were not surprised in any way that Strong would eat this role up and spit it out. He plays real-life cutthroat Roy Cohn, and we get one of the more cinematic arcs, I would say, on this list because his character goes from like a vile antagonist to a sympathetic lost soul by the end of the movie. Now, the movie paints Cohn as a bit of an architect for our present-day Donald Trump character or whatever, however you may view him. Whether that's accurate or not, it doesn't really matter. What fascinated me more is Strong's kind of delicate approach to this highly complex man. You know, this is a guy who fought his whole life to keep everyone at a distance, and then in the end, he couldn't find a single person to stand beside him. You know, it's tragic and poignant. Strong was phenomenal in this. He lost to a season sweeper that year, his buddy from Succession, Kieran Culkin. But Strong would have gotten my vote. At number 4, Willem Dafoe in Sean Baker's The Florida Project. I think Dafoe is one of our greatest living actors. I do. And, you know, more often than not, he's playing something really outlandish, otherworldly, just not a lot of his characters that we can really, you know, connect to. They're not grounded, right? But in The Florida Project, he does come down to earth. He's Bobby, right? He's just this man running a motel, trying to sell a hotel, whatever, on the outskirts of Disney World. He treats that motel or that job like his life's mission, and then he slowly realizes that his dedication could be pointed somewhere else, namely towards a bit of a found family that he's acquired in the movie in Haley and little Mooney. And by the way, a quick shout out to, I believe at the time, 7-year-old Brooklyn Prince. Man, talk about a knockout youth performance. It's one of the greatest I've ever seen. But Dafoe here is quiet, stoic, comforting, charming. You know, we feel safe with him in this movie. But nothing about the circumstances in Baker's film really should make us feel that way. And that's a credit to his performance. He lost to Sam Rockwell that year for 3 billboards, which wasn't really a surprise that season, but it does still sting a little when I look up and realize that Dafoe is still carrying on banger after banger without an Oscar on his mantle. It's insanity. All right, my number 3, as you can see, is one of the more recent ones, Delroy Lindo, of course, in Ryan Coogler's Sinners. Now, sure, I love this performance. That's why it's on the list. But at the same time, I had almost no choice here because just the fact that he got nominated was one of the most glorious surprises of any Oscars nominations morning I've been through. He's this veteran actor who's been overlooked way too many times. And, he's finally hearing his name called for a movie that, by the way, would end up breaking the all-time record, getting 16 nominations last year. It was truly special. Now, in the film, Delroy plays Delta Slim. He's a lover of music and booze and not really anything else. But just like any good found family story, his list of affections starts to grow as the movie goes on. My favorite thread within that is his mentor dynamic with young Sammy, played by Miles Caton. He's passing on his knowledge of the blues, sure, but he's also maybe passing on the torch. Sinners is a cinematic feast. It was one of my favorite of the year last year. And Delroy provides most of our levity in that film because there is a ton of darkness and heavy themes in there. He did lose to Sean Penn for One Battle After Another, like I said, just this past March. At number 2 is Christopher Walken in Spielberg's Catch Me If You Can. Man, the father-son dynamic and those narratives get me every damn time, guys. This one's no different. Leonardo DiCaprio here is playing his son, and Walken's Frank Sr. is a dad who sees himself in his boy, right? But to a fault, really. He knows that he's made way too many mistakes in his life, whether that's, financial decisions, his business, his marriage. But through all of it, Frank Sr. seems to worry the most about how Leo is going to see him, like that lens that he still sees him through. Is he still like a towering figure, an idol, a mentor, a hero? And you can also feel like Frank Sr.'s, pride, sadness, and really regret watching his legacy get carried on and somewhat rewritten by his son. He knows he probably messed that up too, right? His boy. But it's too late now to do anything about it. It's a tragically sweet performance. And in my opinion, I don't know if I've ever seen Walken more human on screen. Now, he would lose that year to Chris Cooper for Adaptation, which was a great performance, and this was a stacked year. But when I think about all these nominees and performances, Walken's is the one that stays with me. I went back as far as I could from Gladiator in 2000 from the 2001 Oscars. It's time for my number 1. And to this day, if you don't know where I am, I'm not in the garage, you will find me up on the hill, dying on that hill of Commodus as one of the greatest cinematic villains in movie history. Period. Of course, Joaquin Phoenix played him in Gladiator. This is such a self-serving, nasty bully of a character. And Phoenix goes all in on him. It's almost like Ridley Scott wrote it, and the character was a bad guy, and Phoenix read it and said, oh, wait a second, he can be much worse. Let me see what I can do here. What I love most is how Joaquin makes Commodus almost like cartoonish, like almost silly, especially in certain moments. But he still evokes this powerful skin-crawling fear about him, And few actors would be able to pull that off, I would think. And this performance also helped continue that trend at the Oscars of these villainous performances, getting nominations from the Academy, and sometimes wins, just not this time, as he would ultimately end up losing to Benicio del Toro, who I had on this list for a different film earlier, but this year he won in supporting actor for the film from Steven Soderbergh called Traffic. All right, well, there you have it. Another garage ranking in the books in my Century series. Don't forget that playlist is tagged down below. If you've just recently joined my channel or found it in the last year or so, you might have missed some of those entries, but I've done the other 3 acting categories already, so make sure you check out that playlist. And I also want to hear from you down below. Let me know what your favorite nomination in the supporting actor category of the last 25 years is. Did I mention it? Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're into it, you can always click join down below and watch my little commercial I made and read all about channel memberships, as it really helps me go a long way out here when it comes to editing and software and everything else. Thank you so much for considering it, and I really do appreciate you tuning in. I will see you out here next time very soon in the garage.